Welcome back to my channel. This video is on Domain 2 of the new CompTIA Security Plus certification exam. Domain 2 focuses on threats, vulnerabilities, and mitigation techniques. It contains 5 out of the total 28 objectives for the exam. Once more, pay particular attention to the verbs in each objective. Let's start with 2.1. Compare and contrast common threat vectors and motivations. This section dives into the world of cyber threats. Think of it like understanding the different types of bad guys in a movie and how they can attack a castle. The types of threat actors range from nation-states, unskilled attackers, hacktivists, insider threats, organized crime, and even shadow IT. But they all have attributes which could be originating from internal or external sources. It could also be based on the availability of funding, resources, and technological support, as well as their sophistication or level of expertise with technological proficiency. Now, nation-states are government-backed groups with advanced capabilities. They are motivated mostly by political and economic espionage. Organized crime are groups motivated by financial gain, often engaging in activities like ransomware, phishing, and theft of data. Hacktivists are groups motivated by political or social causes. They use cyber attacks to promote their agenda. Insider threats include employees or contractors who misuse their access to systems and data, which often is motivated by financial gain or revenge. We also have shadow IT, which includes employees who use unauthorized technology, potentially creating security vulnerabilities. Finally, unskilled attackers or script kiddies are individuals with limited technical skills. They often are motivated by curiosity or a desire to get notorious. So, these motivations are really diverse, ranging from financial gain, which is primarily for cyber criminals, espionage, which is mostly related to government-sponsored or corporate espionage to steal sensitive information, political or social activism, think about hacktivists using cyber attacks to promote their causes, or vandalism, where the attacker desires to cause disruption or damage to systems or networks. Revenge is due to personal motives, often by disgruntled employees or former partners. That wraps it up for Objective 2.1. Next up would be Objective 2.2, which explains the common threat vectors and attack surfaces. Objective 2.2 explains the common threat vectors and attack surfaces. Think of it like how these bad guys attack the castle. There are 4 or 5 major ways we can group these vectors and attack surfaces. They could be message-based or file-based, even image-based. It could be through voice calls, removable devices, vulnerable software, unsecured networks, including open service ports, use of default credentials, weaknesses in supply chain, and most importantly, human vectors due to social engineering. Message-based vectors include emails like phishing with malicious attachments, SMS, short message service, which could be text-based scams with malicious links known as smishing, instant messages, which could exploit vulnerabilities in the instant message platforms, and so on. For file-based vectors, we have malicious files like Trojans or ransomware distribution, as well as for image-based, we have embedded malicious code or links within images, such as the use of steganography. Voice call or voice phishing could be used to trick users into revealing sensitive information over the phone. Also, caller ID spoofing could be used when masking the true caller ID to deceive users. We also have removable devices like malware that is used on USBs for data theft, and vulnerable software where attackers exploit software vulnerabilities for attacks. Think about attack methods based on client software or other legacy software which are old and have weak encryption or weak defenses. These are usually unsupported systems or applications where attackers target these outdated software or operating systems. Networks are critical in cybersecurity, so unsecure networks, including wireless without the right security, or even wired networks where physically connected systems are not adequately secured, or even Bluetooth, where we exploit device connections or data is intercepted through a Bluetooth due to easy pairing. Still, on the issue of unsecured networks, we might have open service ports which can be exploited to gain unauthorized access to the systems or services. Also important is the continuous use of default passwords, which can be also an entry point for bad actors into the system. Supply chain attacks are those that are linked to third-party providers. Think about managed service providers. If these supply chain or third-party providers are breached via service providers, for instance, vendors or suppliers, we also tend to have a breach within our organization. So exploiting vulnerabilities to the external partners could also lead to attacking to the supply chain network. For the most part, human vectors or social engineering, which includes manipulating human psychology for breaches, is the most important. Phishing includes deceptive emails for data theft, phishing, voice-based security social engineering attacks, smishing, which is SMS-based deception techniques, misinformation and spread of disinformation also counts, as well as impersonation, pretending to be someone else to gain the trust of our employees. Business emails could be compromised, where we have targeted email scams for fraud, pretexting, which is fabricating scenarios to manipulate our targets, also compromising websites for target attacks or targeted attacks, known as watering hold attacks, posing as a recognized brand in brand impersonation, as well as typo squatting, which exploits typos in domain names, are all ways in which bad actors can gain access to our systems. That sums it up for Objective 2.2 in our examination. The next chapter is Objective 2.3, which will be focused on explaining various types of weaknesses or vulnerabilities. Objective 2.3. Explain various types of vulnerabilities. Think of it as the weak spots in your castle. There could be quite a good number of weaknesses, ranging from application vulnerabilities, operating system vulnerabilities, hardware vulnerabilities, virtualization vulnerabilities, weaknesses in cloud-specific or supply chain, as well as web vulnerabilities. We also have weaknesses in cryptographic misconfiguration, mobile devices, and zero-day vulnerabilities. Now, let's start with application vulnerabilities. Unauthorized code can be inserted into a program's memory space. This is known as memory injection. Or, data could exceed the allocated memory, leading to potential exploits, which is buffer overflow. Race conditions refers to conflicts that arise when multiple processes are trying to gain your shared resources. Malicious updates are also very critical when attackers tend to introduce harmful code through software updates. Now, for operating system vulnerabilities, as well as web-based vulnerabilities, we have weaknesses in websites or web apps, which could allow the attacker to use SQL injection, where they manipulate the input to exploit database vulnerabilities, as well as cross-site scripting, where malicious scripts are injected into web pages. For hardware vulnerabilities, the low-level software controlling hardware known as firmware could be exploited. Also, security gaps due to discontinued hardware support, which is known as end of life, could also present an opportunity for attackers. Older hardware with outdated security measures, say cryptography, could be a point of weakness. Now, virtualization vulnerabilities include virtual machine escape, where unauthorized breakout from a virtual machine to the actual host of that virtual machine could take place. Also, virtual machine sprawling, which is the unmanaged virtual machines that are installed on your network. Virtual machines could also be reused, where resource reuse could lead to vulnerabilities. Cloud-specific vulnerabilities refer to vulnerabilities that are unique to cloud computing environments. Same as cryptographic vulnerabilities, focuses on weaknesses in the encryption methods that attackers exploit. Misconfiguration vulnerabilities are errors in system setup leading to security holes. But we do have supply chain vulnerabilities, which could be based on the service provider having risk from third-party services used in the supply chain, or a hardware provider where vulnerabilities could be originating from our hardware suppliers. Also, we eventually have software providers where we have risks that are tied to the software components from external providers. Mobile devices tend to be quite vulnerable themselves. You have installed apps from unofficial resources or installed apps from unofficial sources, which could risk having malicious software. This is known as sideloading. Also, jailbreaking, which bypasses the operating system restrictions, can lead to a very compromised device security. Finally, zero-day vulnerabilities are the unknown software flaws that can be exploited by attackers before the fixes are made available. This covers all the areas we can discuss on Objective 2.3. Next up, Objective 2.4, we will be looking at how to analyze indicators of malicious activity given a particular scenario. Objective 2.4, given a scenario, analyze indicators of malicious activity. Now, imagine you're a cybersecurity detective investigating a crime scene in a digital world. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to analyze clues and determine if a cyber attack is on the way. This section, or objective, is going to give you the skills to identify these red flags and protect your system. We'll be looking at malware attacks, physical attacks, network attacks, application attacks, password attacks, cryptographic attacks, and finally, the common indicators of compromise or an attack. Let's start by understanding the malware arsenal. Malware, which is malicious software, is designed to disrupt, damage, or gain unauthorized access to our systems. It can come in various forms like viruses, worms, trojans, spyware, ransomware, you name it. Worms are self-replicating malware that spread through the system, consuming resources and potentially causing damage. Trojans are deceptive malware that are disguised as legitimate software, granting attackers a backdoor access to the system. Spyware are stealthy software that gather user data without their consent and often for commercial gain. While ransomware are malicious software that encrypts our files and demanding a ransom for decryption or release of the data. Viruses are just infected files or system software that replicate in files and memory. Bloatware could be present when you have excessive resource consumption, which slows down your system performance. Keyloggers are out there logging our keystrokes and unusual data transfer could be one of their payloads. Logic bombs are specific trigger events which could cause sudden system crashes, while rootkits are hidden processes which gain unauthorized access to our systems and networks. Physical attacks are straightforward. It could be brute force, where you have repeated login attempts, which leads to an account getting locked out. You could also have radio frequency ID cloning, where unauthorized RFID tags are used due to duplication. We could also have environmental physical attacks, where we have physical damage or tampering with hardware. For network attacks, there are many telltale signs for us. Distributed denial of service or DDoS attacks lead to service unavailability. Amplified DDoS attacks are magnifying attack traffic for a greater disruption. Meanwhile, reflected DDoS attacks are just redirecting and multiplying traffic once again for disruption. We do have DNS attacks, where the domain name service queries are anomalous and they lead to spoofed responses. Wireless attacks on the network lead to unauthorized network access due to signal interference. On-path attacks could also be unauthorized intercepted or interception of data due to traffic redirection. Credential replays are quite frequent, where you have reuse or intercepted login credentials, while malicious code, which could alter the contents, think of code injections, malicious scripts that are being run on our systems. All of these are all telltale signs of network anomalies. Like I said, ARP poisoning, which is a technique where attackers trick the network into routing traffic to themselves rather than the correct location. Rogue access points, think about fake Wi-Fi networks which are set up to steal user information, or evil twins, which are malicious networks that are masking as legitimate ones to intercept data and communications. Application attacks include injections, which are unauthorized codes or data inserted within our system, buffer overflows, which are excessive data overwrites in our program or memory. We could have replay, which is just repetition of intercepted data. The replay could have potential of data integrity being compromised. Privilege escalation would be unauthorized access to higher privileges once a hacker gains access to a system. We could also have forgery, which could lead to manipulation of data or credentials, and directory traversal, where unauthorized access to a directory path can be escalated or redirected to a neighboring directory. Password attacks could range from password spraying, where repeated login attempts with common passwords are done across a majority of your usernames. Brute force attack could be a repeated login attempt with various password combinations on a specific username or multiple usernames. Cryptographic attacks usually come in when we have a downgrade or weakened encryption protocol, which is done covertly, or our hash functions are being forced to collide, leading to collision. Birthday attacks are known for unmasking cryptographic hash collisions secretly. Now, common indicators of our attacks are the amount of accounts that are locked out due to repeated failed login attempts, concurrent sessions that are currently being used due to simultaneous logins from multiple locations, restricting access to specific resources where you have the hackers blocking your content. And we also have impossible traveling, for instance, employees logging in from geographically distant locations, and also multiple logins from locations that are really far apart. Resource consumption could also be a common trigger or common indicator where you have abnormal systems usage, and critical resources becoming unavailable could be a telltale sign that there's something afoot. Now, out of cycle login, think about the regular times that your employees or users log into the system. When you find out these irregular login attempts or patterns, that could be an indicator that there's a compromise going on somewhere. So published and documented or sensitive information being unintentionally exposed could be an indicator that there is something going on in your system that you need to take a look at. And if you have gaps in your log data, meaning it might have been potentially tampered with. Now, cybersecurity is evolving quite much. So as we conclude on Objective 2.4, remember that you have to stay up to speed with current trends, and you should be better in identifying these attacks earlier, training your team, and so on. So that leads us to the final objective of our domain. Objective 2.5. Here we get to explain the purpose of mitigation techniques used to secure the enterprise. Now think about defending your castle from these very bad actors. A few ways you can defend them include segmentation, access control, application allow or deny list, hardening techniques, encryption, configuration enforcement, and so on. So let's dive into each one of these. Segmentation is simply just dividing your network into smaller segments. This will help to limit the impact of your attack spreading across your entire network. Access control, you're able to restrict who can access systems and data by using access control lists, which are like digital gatekeepers with a guest list filtering authorized access. You can also set up your permissions, which are like digital keys, granting entry or locking users from resources. An application allow list is like a VIP list, which allows trusted software and blocks untrusted applications. We can use isolation to separate and protect critical assets. We need to regularly update and fix our software vulnerabilities with patches. Encryption, which secures our data by making it unreadable to unauthorized parties, needs to be top-notch. Dynamically monitoring and identifying as well as addressing security threats is imperative. And using the principle of least privilege, where users and processes get only essential permissions, is very critical. Configuration enforcement will help us maintain our systems according to security standards, and decommissioning, which is critical in identifying and retiring unneeded assets so that they cannot be used as entry to a system, which reduces the surface area of attacks, is also a good way of mitigating our attacks. Hardening techniques are very critical. So we need to strengthen our host security against various threats by encrypting our data, transforming it into secret code, making sure our endpoints are securely put or are really protected per se. So safeguarding our devices from cyber threats with proactive security. We need strong host-based firewalls as well as host-based intrusion prevention systems, which will be able to monitor and block intrusions at the host level. For the ports and protocols that are not being used, we need to disable those. Okay, and the default passwords is very easy to fix, but these are also very prevalent for attackers to take advantage of. So remember, enhance your security just by changing the initial passwords and default passwords of your systems. Finally, remove all unnecessary software, be it on your mobile device, on the cloud, or in your on-site premises. This definitely reduces the attack surface by uninstalling surplus applications. Now, that wraps it up for Objective 2.5, as well as Domain 2 of our Cybersecurity Security Plus certification exam.